Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Better SMB podcast, hosted by David Altina and me, Rob Bull. We're here to help small and medium-sized businesses like yours achieve more. Whether you're looking for practical tips, inspiring stories, or expert advice, we have got you covered. Join us as we dive into the world of business, sharing insights and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Now, before I get into the podcast, I have got to remind you to hit the like button, follow, do all the things you need to do to support this podcast. Anyway, this episode is a fantastic one. We talk to Anthony McMahon. This is an amazing episode as we cover all things tech for the SME. What should owners be investing if they've only got a $5,000 budget or a $50,000 budget? Right through to one of the best summaries of Industry 4 I have been involved in. This one is a goodie. There are so many takeaways for everyone, myself included. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get started. On with the podcast.
Welcome back to the Better SMB podcast, where we aim to provide people in the SMB sector with insight and actionable takeaways to start improving your productivity starting tomorrow. My name is David Altina.
And I'm Rob Bull.
And we're your hosts. Today we have a guest. He's been on a self-employed path as the founder of a number of businesses. Interestingly, one of those is called The Robots Are Coming. The other, Target State Consulting, where he's a tech strategist, public speaker, and podcast host. With over 6 years' experience in this space, his focus is on driving change and promoting a culture of risk-taking with technology to empower clients to embrace innovation and strategies that align with where our technology landscape is going. I'd like to welcome Anthony McMahon to the show. Anthony, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, David. Good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. So tell us about The Robots Are Coming. That just intrigued me, and I didn't quite have enough time to get Googling.
Yeah, look, that was an initiative that a business associate of mine and I, James Dickinson, and there was a third party as well, Dirk Reinhold. We got together. We have collectively a background in data and technology, and with The Robots Are Coming, what we were trying to do was be a little bit fun with a business name to try and draw attention to largely robotic process automation, RPA, but also just business automation as a stack. So with Track or The Robots Are Coming, we sort of put that out there as a brand and just used it to have a bit of fun to drive that thought pattern around what robotics could be within a business.
Awesome. Before we get into kind of the main things here that we want to talk about, talk a little bit about an enterprise architect, because a lot of the people who listen to this show are not going to work in the corporate landscape. They probably don't have large IT teams, and they're probably phoning their mate when they've got a problem. So an enterprise architect is more than likely language they have never heard of.
It's a good point, and it's not something I often sell myself as, for exactly that reason of even people who have worked in corporate have probably not come across one. Technology has stolen terms from the real world for quite a while, and engineer being one of those, and architect being another. And there's a variety of roles of architect within the technology field. There's solution architects, network architects, infrastructure architects. What they're doing is building out or designing solutions and systems at a very bespoke level for an organization. So the network architect's obviously going to be designing what the network needs to look like and sitting across that. So very similar to an architect designing a building. An enterprise architect, there's also a business architect that sits at the same level. They're a little bit more abstracted up, and the role that we're performing is really sitting down with the leadership team of an organization and saying, look, where is your business trying to get to? What are your goals? What is your business strategy look like over the next 3 years? And then turning that back in and saying, well, how are we going to use technology and systems to help enable those goals? Are there systems we need to be focusing on, investing, tolerating, migrating, eliminating? That's a model I use, the time model: tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate, is rather than the business leader thinking, I need to wrap my arms around everything. What the enterprise architect helps them look at is, well, actually, what's going to drive those goals? What's going to either help you increase revenue or reduce cost or reduce overheads? And how do we structure that in the right way? And then we can start to bring in the solutions around that help deliver that.
Got it. How's that land with you, Rob? What do you think?
It takes me back to my corporate days and my bureaucracy and things like that. So you just help people plan their IT. When you say systems, what do you mean by systems?
Yeah, systems. Yeah, systems is a good question. It's not just technology as an application. It's not just saying, hey, you need these applications or these systems in and working. It's also looking at processes, people, information. There's a security element in there as well, obviously, because of the modern age we live in. But it's just looking at the organization and going, have you got the right people? And if you have got the right people, have they got the right skills? Have they got the right capacity? Have you got the right applications that they need to do their job? I'm due later this week to talk with a potential client who is doing a lot of work on Excel that would probably be replaced by an ERP when they're ready. And the reason they've brought me in there is to say, look, how do we take it from very Excel centric to a position where once we put the ERP in, the enterprise resource platform, once we put that in, how do we get there and do it in a way that's sustainable and we're not wasting time and money by making mistakes along the way? So it's systems, it's people, it's process, it's data.
Cool. No, that's right. And that's why because I drop into using those words as well. And we do know that in our heads, we know exactly what we mean. But for a lot of people who are technology less savvy, it is so easy to get caught up in language and terms and terminology in the context of what we're talking about and just get completely lost. So you basically help them plan to set up processes, and when you say, and systems, and making sure there's skill sets to use the applications, i.e. the software or the tools that you embed, so they can work the way that they want to work.
Correct. And so that the people are, if they've got staff, which many of the businesses I'm working with have, but for those organisations, it's making sure that people have got what they need to do their jobs as well. I often feel that the role of the technology department, we overcook it a lot when we talk about what IT does. But ultimately, I see it as to enable the people with the tools that they need to do their jobs, and then get out of the way and let them do it.
Cool. Awesome. Over to you, Dave. That was just my sort of clarification, just trying to, just make it plain language, I guess.
So if we look out there, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and coin the phrase of your business, the robots are coming, right? There's AIs around every corner. AI's in my dishwasher or something, probably. What are you seeing in the way of trends out there? What are some of the big things that you're noticing, and what should people really be thinking about as opposed to just the noise?
It's a good question, and I'm going to actually go back a bit before we jump into what the trends are, because when we say the robots are coming, you could argue that they've already been here for close to 300 years. When we look back at the first industrial revolution, the driver to that was an automated weaving loom. Is it a robot in the sense of what we think of today? No, but it's automation, and that's we've seen that evolution come forward, and we can talk a little bit more about those phases and why I refer to it as the first industrial revolution later on. But the biggest trend right now that I'm seeing is AI, and it's hard to avoid a conversation with any business owner and not be talking about AI. To me, there's been multiple angles driving what artificial intelligence could and couldn't be, and the first mistake that we tend to make when we talk about it is we talk about it as this big beast. AI will take your jobs, but the reality is AI is multiple different capabilities. There's generative AI, which is the flavor of the month. There's been machine learning, predictive analytics, predictive intelligence. We've had different iterations of AI throughout the last 60 odd years. And what we're seeing now is really a tool that's able to power up the way people do their jobs. It's probably the biggest trend that I'm seeing because of the way it is also being talked about by multiple layers. You hear the tech companies, the the tech giants, Microsoft and Amazon, telling us that AI is there and organizations need skills to utilize AI and deliver it and bring it on board. You've got the hype merchants that are out there telling us that it will take our jobs and fear mongering. And then you've got people, business owners, probably most of the people listening to this podcast, just not even sure what it means for them. And I think we're in that really interesting phase with the hype and the trend around AI, that there's just so much noise that it's hard to cut through to what reality is. And what I'd say for any organization is, rather than getting caught up in the hype of we need to have AI, is more take a step back and say, well, what are the problems we have? And therefore, how can some of these AI solutions, whether they be generative AI, which is Copilot and ChatGPT and others, or machine learning, have a look at those and say, are they going to solve my problem? And do I need them to solve that problem in the first place?
That's cool. I'll just nip in before David asks us sort of another question, because I was actually going to say, what is generative AI? Because I hear the term, but you're the first one to go, oh, that equals that and that and that. The AI that I use on a frequent basis, that's generative AI. And then machine learning, I get, for me, I'm the non-tech guy in this conversation, so I'll ask all the non-tech questions, which is lovely. So machine learning is we're putting in information and it'll pick up trends, it'll pick up ideas and tell us what to do, or actually start to do it before we need to do it, and take away that human error factor and all of that kind of stuff.
Great.
Excellent. Yay.
Great.
Yep. I'm keeping up, so hopefully listeners will too.
Yep, it's a good question about what is generative AI, and I think there has been an absence of that in the conversation. It's just, what do we mean by that? And it literally is what it says on the tin. It's there to generate. So those examples I used: Copilot, ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Samsung's got theirs, Apple's got theirs. There's the photo generators. There's Udio that's generating song. They are just generating from a prompt. You as the user are saying, do this thing for me, and it goes away and does it.
And it's only as good as the prompt.
Only as good as the prompt.
Yes, go do the dishes.
Yeah.
Good luck. So I work in the space as well. What are you seeing as the challenges that people are having with this? Like, what I see is a lot of, I guess, complacency around, we don't need to do anything with this. It's just going to be a passing phase. But then on the other hand, the thing I like to talk about with people is, if it's free and you're using it, you're the product. So, you've got a lot of people going, oh, this is great, and they're chucking all their work data in there, and they're, doing that sort of thing with a lot of these online tools. And there's just this level of, I guess I call it complacency, that they can just use it and she'll be right.
Yep. And the challenges, I think there's numerous, because you're right, there's the use it and she'll be right. I was actually on my podcast caught up with Annie Johnson earlier, and we were she's the co-founder of an AI, HRAI, a couple of two-letter words in there, a solution called Human Ear. And we were just talking about that fact that for most businesses, and let's say 95% of organizations, particularly in New Zealand, building their own AI solution isn't necessarily something they have to be out there doing. But with solutions like what Human Ear have got, there's Contented, which is also coming through out of Christchurch. There's Inteller AI. There's a number of these startups that are sort of bubbling through, and they're building a consumable product that people can use. So I think that the first challenge is, how do you make sure you don't get caught up in the hype that we need to build something in Amazon or something in Microsoft, and instead focus on what's out there as a product that might already be able to solve my needs. The second part of it is, it ties into the first, actually. I probably should have brought it in at the start, but I'm bringing it in later. That's how I roll. There's a spectrum of what organizations might fit in on the usage of AI. So we'll put them at one end, consumers, and those are people who are literally firing up Copilot, asking it a question, prompting it, getting the information, popping that into a report, and off they go. At the other end is the creators, and so that's the Human Ears and the Intellers that I talked about. It's the Microsofts and the Googles. It's the companies that are, their profit, their revenue is purely based around the AI product that they are selling, that they have created and they're selling. Now, there's a piece in the middle as well, which is where a lot of companies are going to sit at. And most end users will be a consumer. Not every company needs to be, and this is why I say 95%, not every company needs to be a creator. Not every company needs to go out and create their own tools to make revenue for the business. But what they should be looking at is how they can use AI somewhere in the middle of that two extremes of hey, what do we need to build to make our business more efficient, more effective? Bring in some of the optimization around their processes or around the data they've got, and start to get better outcomes that aren't directly driving revenue, but are indirectly supporting revenue for them. So I think those are the two things that are the biggest challenges out there: is what do I need to use AI for as the first place? And how do I start the second one?
How do you learn? Which might be part of the how do you start, right? Because I heard I'm listening to all of that and I'm going, particularly say my manufacturing clients, and I'm putting myself in a few of their seats, and they're just going, I'm just making sure the guys on the tools are doing a good job, and I've got enough jobs coming in to pay the next year, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
When do I have time to even explore this stuff? It goes into my world with continuous improvement. How do you stop? How do you slow down to learn or get better to go faster in that later on? I guess it's maybe up to owners who are curious enough to dedicate that time aside to do a bit of Googling and the research and, listen to a few. I'm sure there's a number of YouTube clips out there now explaining it all or showing how to do some of it.
Yeah, definitely. And there is part of it. There is the reading, and I'd say stay away from the mainstream media to learn about what's capable. And the reason behind that is that the likes of the New Zealand Herald stuff, the Wall Street Journal, they're driving headlines that are only telling part of the story. They may have sponsored articles from tech companies who are saying, look at what this amazing thing is doing with AI. The reality is probably better spent reading blogs, listening to podcasts, listening to people who are solving these problems already, people that are like them that are solving these problems. Because if we take manufacturing as an example, what you should be able to see is someone out there has already solved this problem, or someone out there has taken the time to use AI. Maybe find out where they're talking about that. Is it a podcast? Is it a blog? Are they standing up speaking at a drinks after 5 or whatever? And just listen, and then think about what they've talked about cover my business, and how could I solve it? And then start looking for the people, because there's the three angles. There's a third angle that I didn't talk about before, is what can it do? How can it do it? Who can help me? So find those people that can help. And bring them in and say, look, I heard about these guys that are building office chairs, and this is how they're using AI in their factory today. How might I be able to apply something similar, because I have those same problems?
So we've touched on manufacturing, and if we think about some of the trends, one of the big things that's out there at the moment, Industry 4.
Yeah.
Rob likes to talk about how his clients are struggling with Industry 1 or 2. I think, and I think one of those was the Stone Age. I'm not entirely sure, but what's your take on that, and how do you think Industry 4 could help our New Zealand manufacturers or hinder?
Before you start, can you start with that plain language? What the feck is Industry 4?
Yeah, and look, I will go back to Industry 1 to help tell that story. I think that's important.
Take notes, Rob.
Because what we mean when we say Industry 4 is the fourth industrial revolution. And if we were to say to someone, hey, what do you think of the Industrial Revolution? They might talk about, that thing that happened about 200 years ago or so. I talked about the weaving loom earlier, I think, and this is where it comes back to. It's in about the middle of the 18th century, so the 1700s, thanks to the help of the weaving loom and mechanization and steam power, technologies that were starting to come through and really advance where we were at, we saw a shift in the way things were happening. So we went from a very agrarian workforce where anything that was made by artisans. It was crafted. It was specially done. Things lasted a long time because they were made to. And the first industrial revolution started to see us do mass manufacturing, and a little bit oversimplifying at this point, but it was mass manufacturing. It was bringing in the weaving loom, as I said, that steam manufacturing. So suddenly things that were driven by people or driven by animals, if there was a lot of horses that used in mills and the like, were steam power took over. Fast forward about 100 years to the middle of the 19th century, and we got to Industry 2.0, and that's the mass production line. So we went from being able to manufacture many things to manufacturing a lot of things. And you probably associate best with Industry 2.0 would be Henry Ford. Really came to the fore through that second industrial revolution. The other thing that changed for us is we went from steam power to electricity. What's interesting, and I can't talk to it right now because I can't remember the specifics of it, but what's interesting is about this time, organizations or factories, as they were switching from electricity, made a big mistake. And instead of realigning their business to fit around electrical generators, They tried to put the electrical generators in the same way that the steam line had run through the factory. Those organisations didn't really tend to last, but we won't go into that one for now. The third industrial revolution was fast forward another 100 years. And that was about the 1970s. And it's when we started to see computers and electronics coming to the fore. So we've gone from machines to computers, and that's doing it for us. Industry 4 is really that evolution of computers that they're so prevalent in everything we do. We've got the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Connected Things. We've got networks. We've got everything is online, and everything's able to talk to each other. So that's where that automation comes through. Because even with those first early computers in the third industrial revolution, they weren't connected. And if you wanted something to happen, you printed it off, you sent it over to someone, they did it, it came back to you. With the fourth industrial revolution, that need to print off was gone. The machines started being able to talk to each other. And that industrial revolution has probably been, I remember talking about that, 2014, 2015 was when it was starting to be talked about at a university level. What fascinates me most there is that the first three revolutions took 200 years to get to. The fourth one took 50. And that talks to the pace of change that we're happening now, is we are just seeing things get faster and faster as technology is getting better and more connected.
So is it the silver bullet that some are beating it up to be?
AI or technology?
Or Industry 4?
Industry 4. No, it's not. And I'll use an example. I won't name names.
I'll say this in context. I'll put it back in context. Like I think we already mentioned on previous podcasts, but it might have been about 3 weeks ago now. I was at a function with Minister Andrew Bailey, and they are investing directly with companies who, one, export, and two, implementing Industry 4. That's their two criteria.
Yeah. And
literally the next day, everything else of funding got cut off.
And I'd say it's still not the silver bullet based on that. And the reason being, if you put automation across a bad process, all you're going to get is bad outcomes faster.
Crap in, crap out.
Crap in, crap out. So if you take AI and put it across bad data, you're going to get bad decisions. If you put robotic process automation in and don't spend time optimizing that process and making sure it's as efficient as possible, it's just going to go bad, right? So is it the silver bullet? No. And Industry 4.0 is definitely not the silver bullet. And the reason I say that is it's not a thing you buy. You can't walk into the shop and buy Industry 4.0, right? It's a very academic term that's been wrapped around it. What you need to be looking at is that whole picture collectively, and it's why I talked at the start about an enterprise architect's role is to look at process and system. And the example I use, I won't mention names, but I've worked with a client recently who brought on board a new system. The system's there to help them with their project management work that they do, and also help them with their billing and invoicing. So it's been a little over a month, and there's been some teething issues, and some of those teething issues have been related to the system, and some of them have been related to the process. The processes were, I won't say weren't documented, but the processes needed to adapt to what the system could do, and had been built in a pre-system organization. Now we've got a system there, the processes need to change, and we're working through that at the moment as well. Had we just dropped that system in and walked away, they'd be in a much worse position than where we are by going, well, hang on, the approvals process, the variations process, the leave process, this is all stuff we need to be looking at simultaneously to it as well.
And I hear that too, and I get a little bit worried because then I hear processes are being adapted to fit the tool, the machine, the system, rather than the third option, which is get the ideal process right and then figure out how to support that. Because what I'm hearing in your scenario is that there was a crap process. They tried to implement it in the system that just sped that up and it didn't quite align, yet they didn't take time to go, how do we want to work? What's a smart way of working? And how then do we get support to achieve that?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an example where we didn't do that first, and we should have. But for most organizations, the reason we didn't do that first in this case was the need to have the system in to solve specific problems was more important than spending the time on the processes that are not working. So it was a trade-off.
That's okay, right? Because then they know the big picture and they know that they're going to come. A lot of businesses, and coming back for the list on behalf of the listeners here, a lot don't have that plan in place first.
Correct. And I think that's where a lot of technology implementations probably fail and fall down, because the organization puts the system in hasn't refined the processes beforehand, hasn't got a plan to come back and touch those systems again, and those processes again and work on them. And within about 6 months, all the staff sit there going, this tool is absolutely useless and it's stopping me from doing my job and I hate it. And everyone sits there and goes, well, what we spend all that money on? Now, the problem is not the technology, it's the way that it was implemented.
So part of Industry Forum, part of the great things people talk about is this ability to connect to your suppliers. They can order from you, you can push orders to them, customers, suppliers, and so forth.
Yeah.
Talk about the can of worms that opens up. Because if I've got all my stuff and I'm just sitting there and it's all happy, and now all of a sudden I go and plug it into my customer, or I plug it into my supplier or suppliers, what could I be opening myself up to there?
I think the simplest thing you're opening yourself up to is what if the supplier can't meet your demand? That you've optimized everything and you've made your business as efficient as possible, and you've got one supplier who supplies a critical widget. If you open the tap at the other end and the customers start buying it en masse, what happens if that supplier can't meet your demand? And what's the impact that has on your organization? And to me, and I know not everyone looks at this, but to me, an organization that does that, and then when the customers start complaining, says, all right, we've got problems with our suppliers, is like, no, I don't care. As a customer, I don't care what your suppliers are doing. I bought from you and I want this thing. So I think that's the biggest challenge that you'll open yourself up to, is you just potentially cannot fulfill the orders fast enough by putting that end-to-end piece in place, whatever those orders might be. Customer dissatisfaction, reputation, once it's gone, it's kind of gone. And so that's where, and from a technology guy, I won't say I know all the answers here, but there's multiple ways to solve that. There's you could be having multiple supplier or a multi-supplier strategy. You could be working with some of those key suppliers to make sure they're on the journey with you as well, or you could just put artificial bottlenecks in. There's different ways to solve it. Make your product that you're selling a limited run so that you can keep up and the customers can't buy it faster than you can physically produce it.
In this space, and I've had a few conversations around this, particularly for those who are investing in Industry 4 and getting that connectivity for that supply chain up and down the supply chain, that's great. Is there a risk of the rich getting richer? And how I explain that a little bit better is, you've got some definitely smart businesses that are gearing themselves up, but there is just that part of that ecosystem, that next level, probably feeding into them, and they just, again, probably still struggling with Industry 1, and they don't have the time or the cash Industry 4 ready, or get connectivity ready, so I can still service the big boys if I'm a provider, a service provider, or subcontractor or whatever.
And I'm going to challenge and say it's not just about money, it might even be time. Can you afford to spend the time, let alone the money, on it? Because that jump from, if you're working with someone who's still in Industry 1 or Industry 2, the jump
and
to
there's
Industry...
a lot of those, right? There's still a lot of those, and good on them.
Yeah, and hey, it's working for them. So we're not criticizing them at all, but that jump from Industry 2 to Industry 4 is not easy. It's not fast, and it's not something you can rush. It might be a 3-year journey or a 5-year journey if that's what you're going down for. And I guess the question there is, can you afford to take that time? Can you afford to move at the speed that needs to? And not financially, but what are you going to have to stop to do that? Or what do you have to bring in to help you move at that pace so that you can get there? And I think it's not so much that the rich get richer. It is a fast mover outcome more. So wealth's always going to generate wealth. We can't get around that. It's capitalism 101. But it's the fast movers that are able to capitalize on it. And if you're in a comparable industry to a competitor and you can revolutionize your business or evolve your business in 6 months, and everyone else is going to take 2 years, you're going to win if you do it properly.
And we know when rich get richer, the ones implementing it, they're just getting further and further away.
Correct.
And that bridge is just getting bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, particularly that I'm big on that next tier, because I certainly think the top 5, 10, 15% of, say, in the manufacturing space, they're going to take off. They're doing it. They're getting ready. But the next tier aren't. And so we're going to have this 15% just smoking ahead, but all the suppliers are just not quite grabbing it. And it's this big thing. And that gap's just going to get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to get harder and harder to close, and we'll probably start to see them consume the ones that are left behind, because there may still be something that they need in there that they're able to then wrap their systems around and help faster. So you'll have less and less businesses, but you'll have the ones that are there will be bigger as a result.
Are you seeing that happen now?
I don't have any direct examples, but what I'm going to talk to is liken it to globalization, which we saw through the 19th and 20th century. Companies just branching out, and building either their supply chain or moving into markets where they could get better access to certain resources, which in a way is kind of like colonization was in the 2 centuries before that, but keep it out of the political conversation for now. I think that's what we're starting to see is certainly there's less and less brands out there because they are being consumed, or they're just closing down because they can't afford to stay open anymore.
So for the business owner that's listening to this going, crap, I don't want to be left behind. On Monday morning, after they've spent the weekend sweating bullets, what do you think they need to, what action do they need to take?
Well, that's a loaded question.
Honestly, can I butt in? If they've got, I'll put it into some financial criteria. If they've got $2,000 to invest into some start of this process, what would you get them to do?
Hire a business analyst. Yep. Spend that money on bringing a business analyst in. And for those who aren't familiar with the business analyst role, they're in there to ask questions and find problems and help design outcomes.
Okay. Then if they've got $20,000, what would you do?
I'd keep hiring that business analyst, to be honest. We're going to get to a point where, yes, the obvious answer is that they will be able to buy some technology, but you use that business analyst and maybe they might be supported by a designer or a developer, but using that $20,000 invested in a business analyst to find the problems and identify the solutions. Not only will they identify the solutions, but they can then sit there, and this is where enterprise architecture comes in as well, and go, well, here's these 5 problems. Here's where they're prioritized. Here's where they're going to make the most meaningful change to your business. And here's how we can solve them. And here's how much that will cost you to solve it financially and time. And that's that last piece that's where the silver bullet comes in, is now that we know what the problems are and what the solution looks like and how much it's going to cost us to solve that, we now know what the silver bullet's going to be that we can put in there. But we can't do that without having gone through that process first.
Sorry, I butted in on your question, David, but I was just trying to put it in a context that is still real for our SME or SMB owners, right? Because I think it is, and I see this obviously with my role as well, and you'll see it, well, all 3 of us, is the fear of spending that money to get advice first. They feel like they need to spend money to get a machine, a widget, a software, and they're scrambling for that silver bullet, and it's poorly thought out.
Yeah. And that's where that spending that on advice becomes hugely valuable, because that machine, so that advice might cost you $20,000. That machine might have cost you $50,000 and then sit there and do nothing. Whereas with the $20,000 of advice plus $40,000 machine, that $40,000 machine will be implemented properly and might drive you revenue a lot faster than you're expecting.
So when we look at the average, turnover of a SME, so of up to 50 staff in New Zealand, I think it's 850,000. So you're talking 5% of their budget towards this stuff.
Yep. And 5% is the upper limit to what I expect a business to spend on the technology. The statistics and analysis, whatever you want to call it, show that an organization, depending on what sector they're in and what their job is, will spend somewhere between 2 to 5%, or should spend, not will, but should spend somewhere between 2 to 5% on technology of revenue.
And when you're saying spending on technology, that's advice, support, planning, as well as the software, as well as the applications, as well as any other technology that they need to be taken. That's the whole. So you're getting another team member for that, 2, 3, 4, 5%.
Yeah, as part of that, you're getting another team member. Absolutely, you're right. It's when we say technology, we'll come back to that point I made at the start about it's people, it's process, it's systems, and it's data.
Okay. And when you look at it, and I've just been trying to furiously Google and find the statistic, which I can't quite find, but one of the numbers I thought I saw was somewhere around 70% of technology projects fail. So when business leaders are looking at implementing technology, you're right, Anthony, they go, oh, I need some shiny AI. I need a shiny new server. I need a something, and I need to get it in and working. And then they find out it's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So if you think it's expensive to invest in doing it properly, it's actually not even close, because you're probably doing it 2 or 3 times. If you try the implement first and then fail, start again, right?
Correct.
Why do you think we've got this bias for action versus a bias for taking our time and doing things the right way?
And I think this is, it comes back to it. I'll bash them a little bit, but it comes back to the headlines that the media put out there. Everyone else is doing it. You need to do it too. FOMO. And so that's where that bias from action is coming from. And equally, business owners, and I put myself in the same category, don't really like talking to the competition because they don't want to give anything away. And therefore, we get into this point where, well, I'm not sure if they're doing it or not. I'm going to do it anyway, just in case, or I can't afford to do that. And there's examples, and it's not just at the bottom end, it's at the top end as well, of actually, if you'd worked together, we might have got a better outcome for everyone by spending a little bit of money and sharing some secrets. And the ones I'm going to pick on here are the banks. And specifically for the KYC processes that we've seen in the last 15 years. Now, KYC, know your customer, that's where when you go into a bank to open an account, they ask for your passport and they ask for all these forms of ID, and that takes freaking ages, and we have to do it if we want to have a bank account. We've got to a point, because of the way that was implemented by the banks, where they all did it in isolation, that now there's no central platform in New Zealand to say, I am me, and this is who I am. Government's got Real Me, but it's not integrated into everything. So if you're buying a house, as an example, for the first time, you go to the bank you might go to the broker, and they will onboard you. They'll onboard you for the bank as well. So they'll do that KYC. You'll go to a real estate agent, they'll do it. You'll go to a lawyer for conveyancing, they'll do it. You go to the insurance company, they'll do it. So that's 4 times you've had to prove who you are in the process of a single transaction. Now, you could be adding on some additional services into that mix. You might get up to 7 different people that you've had to prove who you are, all because 15 years ago, when the banks were told you need to start this, instead of working together and going, what's the best outcome for our customer? They went, how do we make sure it's easy for our customer to do business with us? Or more importantly, how do we make sure that we're following the rules?
Interesting, because going back to that luncheon with Minister Andrew Bailey, that's one of the pet projects, is to open all of it, so there's that central that everyone can tap into, knowing who you are, and make it easy. Because he said, it's bonkers. Just the examples that you go. Just going back to the stat that David shared, and I'll slightly move away from technology. Is that failure? Because, and this goes back to the whole business owners, our SMB owners are often savvy in their business and in their sector, but they don't have the skills to run the business. And is that failure because we don't upskill our business owners around change process? Because lean implementation has got a success rate of 5 or 25%, great business model I'm sitting on. So it's all quite similar. And I'm thinking that's probably the inability to manage change, rather than part of that's making decisions and that building platform and why we're doing this and getting the team behind it and that whole cycle. But I think that's part of it too. So it goes back to that sort of really low knowledge base about those kind of skill sets for our business owners, leaders.
Yeah, look, I think that's a big part of it, of change, in the sense of bringing the people on the journey and building trust in what you're doing, and helping them get to that end goal. Absolutely. Failure to do a proper change process. This is what I talked with Annie about on my podcast, and it's what I've spoken with others about as well. Failure to follow change management will lead to project failure, because you'll have eroded trust in what you're doing. I think the other side, and this is a skill thing as well, is we don't accurately define what success might look like in the project before we start the project. So
weird. Funny that.
Yeah, funny that. What most organizations use, and I certainly encounter this every place I go, what most of them use as a measure of success is what we call the iron triangle: time, cost, and quality. Is it on time? Is it on budget? And is it meeting requirements as they've been set out at the start? Now, 2 things in there. If you don't know what success looks like, how do you know that you're tracking towards it? But 2, if you haven't taken the time to build those requirements around what your project is, and this comes back to that BA, How do you know you're even heading in the right track? And I've done some research on the iron triangle, and I see it as a very good indicator of the likelihood of success for your project. If you're over time and over budget, you're probably going to be failing. But there could be reasons behind why not. If you think about the success criteria that you set out, what does finished look like for us? Then you're going to have a much better view of when the project is done. And the example I used in this was Jade Stadium down in Christchurch when they were rebuilding it for the World Cup in 2011. The project was on time and it was on budget and it was meeting specifications. I think it needed to be 40,000 seats or something. Whatever it was on time, it was on budget, and it was going to be fit for purpose. They never used the stadium because of the earthquakes. Now, if we measure it on time and budget and quality, man, that project sounds really successful, right? Hey, it was on time, it was on budget, it was getting ready to open for the World Cup, it was going to be a success. I put that project down as a failure because it never reached what it was setting out to do. And that's not a fault on the project team. That's one of those external factors you can't plan for. But that's what organizations need to look at is, what does this finished product do for me? And how do I measure that so that I know that I'm getting success from it?
So is it experience, vision, rather than sort of widget? Does it just do the 1 + 1?
Yeah.
What does my job look like if this is successfully running? Not
Correct.
just, is this successfully running?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really like that.
Like a project vision as opposed to a vision for your business.
Correct.
Yeah.
We could use Lego Series Play for that as an aside. Anyway.
Bit of a plug. Get the plug in.
Right. Always get the plug in. Absolutely. Just a little bit of a random question. When you're walking into an SME, just this good, solid business, might have 10, 20, 30 staff members and all of that, and the business owner, the leaders, the managers are really just have got this pickle of fear around them, around technology. And it's like me with my accounts. I just curl up in a ball of fear. When we mention technology, what's their biggest fear that they have?
By and large, for me, it is fear of the unknown. And I guess it comes back to that point that I said before of they don't know what is out there. They don't know how it can help them. And they don't know who can help them find that out. And that would be the biggest fear is they don't want to waste money or feel like they're wasting money on things they just don't understand.
What's 2 tips you can suggest for them to overcome that?
Hiring a BA. Hiring a BA, and I know a couple of good BAs. So if anyone does want one, they can certainly reach out, and I'll put them in touch. But apart from hiring a BA, I think is be and I've got to apologise because I keep drawing this back to the conversation I had with Annie Johnson this morning. I'm stealing her words now, but she used it as be intensely curious about what it can be, and that doesn't mean you have to go out there and look at everything and do study tours around the world and see what others are doing, but just be curious about what's happening out there and take some time out of your day. It only has to be 10 minutes to do a little bit of research or to look at what's happening or to read that blog. Yes, I know that might be valuable time that's spent doing something else in the business, but it might be enough that you've read that article, you've listened to that podcast, and then later on when you're at home walking the dog or watering the garden or whatever, something might trigger and go, hang on a minute, what about that? So that's my first one, is be intensely curious. And the second one is don't be afraid to ask for help. And we joke about don't go and hire a BA. Don't have to go and hire a BA, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Be prepared to put your hand up and say, does anyone know who can help me with this?
I'm always asking, if it's not openly in the public forum, certainly on LinkedIn, I've got my people like yourself and both Anthony and David, and there's a whole bunch more of my specialist go-tos. If you don't know, who do you know? And I'm always asking for help. Absolutely. Doesn't have to be big and scary.
No, definitely not.
Thanks for listening in. Thanks for your time, Anthony. Some great highlights there for business owners looking to leverage technology as a part of building a smarter business. So many things that we've talked about that will be really valuable for business leaders starting a technology journey, and more than likely we'll look to get Anthony back again. The key takeaway for me, what does success look like? Make sure you take the time to define that at the start of any technology project. And as Anthony said, make some time to be curious. Thank you.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Better SMB podcast. If you've made it this far, we are going to assume that you've enjoyed the discussion and keen for more. If there is a particular topic or someone who you would like us to invite onto the show, let us know in the comments or message us directly. Our aim is to make this podcast as relevant as possible to all SMB owners. Remember to follow or subscribe whenever you listen to the podcast so you never miss another episode. Until next time, stay efficient and keep getting better.